So we are moving on to financial planning and budgeting in chapter 8. Planning and budgeting play critical roles in the finance function of all organizations, all hospitals. Planning includes the overall process of preparing for the future. You are trying to plan, so financially plan for the future. But in budgeting, you provide the tools that tie the planning and control functions together. So budgeting turns to be an offshoot of the planning process. Budget is the basic tool that is used to line together planning and control functions. So the chapter will introduce the basics of planning and budgeting, including how to do the variance analysis. Organizations plans focus on long-term picture, but you want to plan for the immediate future, and you also want to ensure that the current performance is consistent with organizational goals, and that is what planning includes. In the planning process, there is this strategic plan, which is the foundation of the planning process. It contains a rough roadmap for the future and the business's value statement, mission statement, and vision statement. Financial plans and budgets are developed within the framework of the business strategic plan. The value statement is a guiding light for the strategic plan. It represents the core priorities that define organizational culture. Mission statement defines the overall purpose of the organization. Why do they even exist? The vision statement shows what is your desired position, what is your goal and objective at a future point in time for, let's say, 10 years or 5 years. The operating or 5-year plan lays out the organization's goals and objectives. And also, the operating plan provides the guidance that is needed to meet those goals and objectives. Um, so, the operating plan format has many chapters. The first chapter would include values, mission, vision, and a rough roadmap. The chapter 2 will include organization goals and objectives. Chapter 7 will include functional area plans, and some of the components of the functional area plans are marketing, operations, finance, which is why we are here, administration and human resources, and facilities. So the most detailed portion of the plan comes in the first year. In the financial plan format, which is part C of the operating plan, we look at the financial condition, capital investments, and financing. So there is a financial condition analysis. So the project that you do for this class, financial condition analysis, is actually a part of the financial plan format. Then there is the capital budget, forecasted financial statements, external financing requirements. Then the second part is about working capital management. That includes the overall policy of the organization, the cash budget, how much cash do you have on hand, cash and marketable securities management, inventory management, revenue cycle management, and short term financing. So, to be effective, you need to go according to the financial planning schedule. And you also need to be consistent with the vision, values, and the mission statement. And the part 3 is budgeting and control. So there is different types of budgets: statistics budget, revenue budget, expense budget, operating budget, and control procedures. Like I already said, that if you want to be effective in your financial planning, you want to make sure that you are consistent with the vision and the mission and the goals of the organization. So budgets are detailed plans, and they are expressed in dollar terms that specify how resources will be used over some period of time. Budgets can be developed and applied to any level within an organization. So you can apply it at the aggregate level, by department, by service line, by contract, and by the nature of the expenditure. Budgeting is the process of preparing and using a budget. Budget specifies how resources will be obtained and how they will be used during some future period. So now, for the budgeting to be effective, it must not be thought of as financial staff tools, but as managerial tools. So budgets are used for planning, for communication, and for control. When we say communication, what we mean is that we need to communicate operational expectations within an organization. It also means that senior executives allocate financial resources among competing demands within an organization, because there will be a lot of demands. People will want budgets for this purpose and that purpose. And as executives, you need to make sure that you're able to judge which demands are, more prior uh, as compared to the other ones. Also, feedback about the relative financial performance of the entity for which they are accountable. Control is when actual results differ from those that are specified in the budget. Managers use variance analysis to identify the drivers that cause divergent performance. So, how are budgets used for control? Is by making sure that you don't spend too much on certain costs, and that is why you need to do the variance analysis. Now, there are certain budget types. For the statistics budget, at large organizations, the statistic budget is the foundation budget. It develops the input data needed for other budgets. It contains basic forecasts for volume of services provided, the resources, for example, the labor and capital that is needed to provide those services. Smaller organizations may sometimes not have statistic budget. It is the cornerstone of the budgeting process because it specifies the patient volume and resource exemptions that are used in other budgets. It does not provide detailed information on resource consumptions used in other budgets. It does not provide detailed information on required resources, such as staffing. It is very difficult to make because patient volume forecasting is not easy, and patient volume estimates are the heart of the statistics budget. If the volume forecast is off the mark, consequences can be serious. Hospital may not be able to meet the needs of the patient. Now, the revenue budget combines volume data from the statistic budget with the reimbursement expectations to forecast revenues. The end result is a revenue forecast in the aggregate, inpatient revenue, by department, by service, by diagnosis, and by payer. The revenue budget will compile operating revenue forecast by service in the aggregate, for example, inpatient revenue and individual diagnosis basis. Individual diagnosis forecast is summed and compared with aggregate service group forecast. And the next one is expense budget. Like revenue budget, expense budget is denied from it does not. So the expense budget combines volume data from the statistics budget with detailed resource utilization data to forecast expenses. It's divided into labor, like salaries and wages, and non-labor components, like depreciation, lease, utilities, and medical supplies. The focus of a expense budget is on cost of providing services rather than resulting revenues. Like revenues, expenses must be forecasted at multiple levels. Expenses must always be broken down into fixed and variable components for the expense budget. And the last type we have is the operating budget. Operating budget flows from revenue and expenses budgets. For small business, the statistics revenue expense budgets are used to create operating budget in a single step. For larger organizations, the operating budget, which focuses on projected profitability, combines information from the revenue and expense budgets. Smaller organizations may use a single operating budget in place of multiple budget types. It is prepared at the subunit level, for example, department on the product line.